Hi friends, wanted to check in here. I know I haven't posted in a while because if you don't know this about me, I do produce a lot of online series and trainings, and I am thick in production of a 300-hour advanced online yoga teacher training. So I've got some good reasons, but I haven't forgotten about you, and I've also noticed there's quite a new followers on here, so I wanted to check in, drop in a tutorial for this week. I'm going to do my best to continue to post once a week every Friday. Would love to hear some of the things you're interested in from me. So I do a lot of tutorials because I do train teachers on how to be yoga teachers. So alignment is something I'm really passionate about. And if you are too, or if you're new to yoga, you've been practicing at home, not really sure if you're doing the poses right, I'm a great resource for you. I have a lot of free ebooks. You can go into the description box, check out my asana guidebook ebook. I also have a beginner online yoga series, and honestly, a series for everyone. Handstands, core, flexibility, you name it, I got you. So for today's tutorial, this is actually one of the tutorials in my online 200-hour yoga teacher training, as well as my online beginner series called Align Your Asana Beginner Yoga Series. So it gives you a little taste of the kinds of information that I can give you on your yoga poses. I hope you enjoy. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give me a like, a share, and a comment below. Half moon pose, Ardha Chandrasana. So now we have a standing balancing pose with an open hip. So we'll talk about that here. We'll have Katie go ahead and take the posture, have a quick look at it. So you can see that her hip joint is starting to open, so it's moving one away from the other. And the standing leg, because the hip is open, the standing leg femur bone is rotating outward. Her heel is in line with her hip, shoulders in line with her heel, and the wrists and shoulders stacked on top of each other. Her standing leg is like her Tadasana leg, so toes are pointing forward, crown of the head is forward. So we'll review some common misalignments here, starting with the foot. So oftentimes what you'll see is students pivot the standing foot, and this is happening for two reasons. One, they're trying to distribute the weight of that bottom foot in an effort to be more balanced and stable. Two, it's also coming from the hip joint. So I just talked about, you can go ahead and stand up, Katie, how the standing leg is actually externally rotating, even though it's pointing forward of the mat. And that's because the hip joint is now opening up on top of that standing leg. And so if you can imagine here, as without even fully coming to the pose, as this hip joint opens this way, and we're calling for the leg femur bone to still face forward, it's actually externally rotating in the hip joint. So I want you to just let that sink in. Hips are going that way, the thigh bone's going this way. Now if we turn the foot, what did we just do? We close the hip. So in fact, it's doing kind of a disservice to this pose by pivoting that foot in. So that's one of the very first things you want to look for, and it's very common. So because we know that that's coming most likely from a tight hip joint, the student would really benefit, and it's also coming from being imbalanced or an inability to balance rather, student would benefit from placing that bottom hand on the block. Now notice the block goes away from the body a little bit because she's got to shift her weight forward. The shoulder still stacks right over the wrist, and it creates a really nice line actually with the block, because when the hand is down, the shoulders go down and the body becomes a little bit more diagonal. But now we've got this nice line from shoulder to hip to heel. This thigh's going in that external rotation, pointing forward. This hip is deeply opening up. And in order to open up, we need a strong glute medius of the bottom leg as well as the top. So have you turn around so we can see those muscles here. So when we are not using our glute medius muscles, the leg is going to begin to abduct away and on the up and the bottom here. So if we have her really engage the outer standing leg hip, she squeezes it in, you notice how that pulls the thigh bone into the midline there. And then same with the top leg. She's actively engaging the glute medius, and that's helping the external rotation. So the glute medius is one of the external hip rotator muscles. So it's helping open the hip and stabilize there. Now, a common tendency is that with this back leg to go behind the hip a little bit. That's it. And we know that when the leg does that, we've gone into extension in the spine and we're probably losing our front core muscle. Some of this is just awareness. So we could actually ask the student to take a peek towards their right toes. And if they can't see them, then we know that they need to bring those toes a little bit more forward until they come in slightly into view there. Excellent. I'll have you take a quick break, come on out. Let's move, actually before we move up to the body, just a quick reminder, anytime those legs are straight, you want to engage the quadricep muscles, straighten out the knee. Feet are flexed here, so keeping the calf muscle, the back of the leg stretched and active. Let's talk a little bit about the upper body, some of the common tendencies we see here, and then the alignment points. So oftentimes we'll see a leaning forward. And a just kind of lack of engagement, shoulders rolling forward, amazing. So for Katie, using the block, or if the hand was on the floor, you can actively push down into the block or the floor, and that'll straighten up the arm, and then we'll have her roll her right shoulder back. So the shoulder blades are going to draw in towards the spine. And then same thing, we'll have her straighten her left arm here, and retract the shoulder blades towards the spine. And you'll notice that retraction is what's opening up her chest. So let's see that from the other side. So we'll look at the common misalignment there. The shoulder blades are spread away, shoulders, heads of the arm bones are internally rotating. So we're going to ask her to straighten her arms, push down through the block, retract the shoulder blades together, and then she gets that nice straight line. Great. Let's talk about a couple adjustments here. So she can, I will stand over here, you can stay right there. Let's say her hip was closed. I would stabilize hip to hip, take my hand to the front of her hip bone point, and I'm going to open up. I'm going to show this on both sides as well. So I can also be right here if the top arm shoulder is rolling in, and give her an upper body adjustment as well. Excellent. Now, if I saw that the hip was closed and the foot, I'm going to have you switch sides, and the foot was not straight from the hip, instead of turning towards her upper body, I would be here, stabilize through the pelvis with my hand on her frontal hip point, and I'm going to direct her leg back. Now at the same time, I'm going to need her to actively engage those hips, or we'll both lose balance a little bit. So once I have her leg back, then I can go ahead and I'm on the underside of that frontal hip point, and I'm lifting up and pushing back. And at the same time, my standing hip is giving her a nice adjustment, getting that hip in alignment as well. Now remember, when you leave your student, you don't just walk away because she's balancing. So I first do my hip, let her know I'm going to come out, and then she can release out as she's ready. Because this is a standing balancing external pose, hip pose, this would be a posture that you'd want to move into and out of from another standing balancing external hip pose. So for instance, you could come into it from Warrior 2, any of these postures that we've done in the external, and she just bends and goes right into it, and then she'd come out the same way. So bend her leg and land. You could do reverse warrior. We don't have to go through all of them, but you could do your side angle pose, triangle pose, very common way to do this posture as well. Now we'll take a twist with this posture, revolved half moon pose, Parivrtta Ardha Chandrasana. This pose is a little awkwardly named because our half moon pose is an open hip standing posture. But our revolved variation of it is actually a closed hip pose. It actually resembles more of Warrior 3 with a twist. So we'll see how that looks here. So Katie will come into the pose. We'll take a quick glance. So you can see here her legs are in Warrior 3. Her left hand is down and she's twisting. So we've got heel in line with hip, shoulder at the same distance. The top shoulder is the same distance of her hip, and she's taking a twist through the thoracic spine. All right, we'll have you come on out of that pose. So, I would never sequence those two poses back to back. You'll learn in your sequencing module that it's best to kind of keep the same category of poses together. So coming into this posture, exactly. So some people will try to bring their palm down. You'll see a lot of compensations in the legs, the inability and tilting of the pelvis there as she rotates her hips instead of her thoracic spine. So the very first thing we want to do for this student is place a block. Now remember, the block goes underneath the shoulder, and she can start to bear weight on there. Now the block will also give her more space to be able to free up the hamstrings and hip joint so that she can straighten that leg. One of the most challenging parts about this pose is getting this back leg to lift up. It requires a lot more effort and activation of the muscles once we add this twist. And one of the reasons why is because we're essentially driving this part of the body under us, and this leg and the hip all want to follow it. And then we're having to ask the inner thigh muscles of that lifted leg to really turn on. So from here, we would ask the student to drop her right hip down, lift the left leg up, and she really has to use the glute muscles here of the lifted leg to get this leg nice and lifted. We'll ask her to engage through her quad muscles. One thing we could do is, Katie, if you flex your foot, I could press into her foot, and she presses into my hand there. Great. In terms of the upper body, we also will see some rounding of the shoulders. And again, if they're taking the twist from the hip, we'll see the slanted hip. So we want, remember, with our twist, for the arm that's lifted, the shoulder blade to retract towards the spine, and for the chest to turn in the opposite direction. So I can stabilize her here. I'm hip to hip. I'm going to hold the other hip also to stabilize. Take my hand underneath her deltoid and begin to turn her. And as I turn her, I'm actually lifting the hip of the lifted leg upward, and she can begin to rotate there. She's working really hard, but you can see the same action of the twist in the upper body is the same for all the other poses we've been talking about. Great, you can come on down. So really need to use those obliques here to turn and twist that the thoracic spine. Let's take this pose and also our half moon pose over to the wall. This is one of my favorite postures to do at the wall and to teach at the wall, because you really get that feedback of just how much you can open the hips. So we'll have Katie point, or you at home, I'd love for you to do this at home, your standing leg hip will be against the wall. You'll take a block and just kind of get it ready to go. And you can see she's already taken a slightly open hip stance here to prepare. So she'll go ahead and bend, and we'll have you have your hip away from the wall to start. So this might be what your posture looks like in the center of the room. But now we can use the wall as information, because this is how much you want to open that hip. So the hip actually stacks all the way over that standing leg until you'll feel your glute muscle of the lifted leg hit the wall. And then same thing with the heel. You'll know exactly where in space the heel needs to go because you've got the wall there. It's not going to go behind. She's got her foot nice and flexed. And then same thing with the upper body. You can really press your shoulder blades into the wall, and that will give you some stability to train and teach your body to retract the shoulder blades in. This is such a great pose to do here. And now to come out, she'll bend her standing leg, and then just land in that open hip a little bit and rise right out of the posture. We can also take our revolved using the wall. Again, another kind of juicy way to use the wall here to get deep into this pose. For this one, you'll take the leg that's away from the wall. That will be your standing leg. So she can lift her opposite leg up. Good. And same thing here. We get lots of information because this entire lifted leg will be against the wall, and she can continue to rotate and really feel that rotation as she reaches her twisted or upper arm towards the wall there. It's also really good information with the hips, because if this hip was driving down, you'll feel that against the wall. Excellent. So give those a try.